Hi everyone, Rich Crescenti here with another in our series of videos making music with Melodyne, and today we are discussing creating harmonies from existing vocal tracks. And that means not just creating harmonies, but how to make them sound different, sound a little thicker, a little fuller, how to make that mix really pop in the way that you want it to. Now, everything I'm doing today can be done in Melodyne Assistant or Editor. I'm using Melodyne Studio to explain this, and it has one beneficial feature, which is the ability to see multi-track view. And when you're doing this kind of expansive vocal production, being able to look at multiple tracks at once is a very nice feature. All right, so let's jump in and take a look. This is a track called Watching the News by the Love Shakers out of Austin, Texas. Let's give this a listen.
When I woke up this morning, I was watching the news, yeah.
Okay, nice. I like this, right? We've got these doot-doos on the left-hand side, and there is a harmony created right there. But I've got these oohs on the right-hand side, and there wasn't a harmony created for that. And so I would like to create one. I think that would balance this out nicely. So in this case, I think generally the easiest thing to do is just to duplicate the track, right? As you can see, I've already got Melodyne on this track for my oohs right here. So I'm just going to right-click and choose duplicate and say OK. And then I'm just going to go in real quick here and change the name to oohs 2 so that we can keep track of them right there. All right, now when we open up our Melodyne window, you'll see that we've got oohs 1 right here and oohs 2. And if we listen,
When I woke up this morning,
the only difference is that it's a little bit louder because all we've done so far is duplicate it. There is no difference between them so far. Okay. And now from here, if you are gifted with golden ears or you have a lot of knowledge in theory and harmony, you can just start dragging to whichever notes you want these to be. But maybe you need a little more help. Maybe you want a little bit of guidance. You want to know what might or might not work within the context of this track. And Melodyne makes that easy. And two things that will help you will be your key track and your chord track. And those are designated by these two icons right here. The double sharps right here will show and hide your key track, and the triad will show and hide your chord track. Now, in order to get accurate key and chord information, we can't really just use a vocal. At very best, you would get something ambiguous right there. And we really want to know what's happening in the context of this song. So what we need is something that is indicative of the whole song, something that is polyphonic, something that is not really distorted. And so in this case, I selected the piano track that's in this song. Let's give this a listen. Plays that way through most of the song. This is great because this really is through the whole song and it kind of shows us what's going on with the song right there. So I'm going to hit Command A to select all of those notes, come up here to my key track and right click on it and choose Analyze Keys. All right, and now Melodyne is looking at this and it says it thinks this is the key of B minor. You can always double click this again to write in your own or right click on it to choose one of these other ones if you think Melodyne guessed incorrectly. I'm going to do the exact same thing right here with my chord track. I'm going to right click and choose Analyze Chords. And now what we see is the key of the song and all of the chords that are happening at any given time in the song right here. This is great. Now that we have this information, we can set up the background of Melodyne to show us potential options that may make this a little easier for us. So, since we're using Melodyne Studio and we can look at multiple tracks, I'm going to set my original track, these oohs, as this gray background right here. Remember, in Melodyne, gray blobs cannot be edited. They are only a visual reference. And this new duplicated track as my orange blobs. And now what's great is, with the background, I can come over here to this treble clef, and right now we are displaying the key of the song as the background. You can see white lines are in the key, gray lines are not in the key. And we've also got it set to key snap. Now that is really useful because that means that when I drag a note, it's going to snap it to notes that are only in the key of the song. So as I drag this harmony around, it will always move to notes that are in the key of the song. You still may have to experiment to find what sounds best to you, but you know that the notes will be in the key of the song. So I'm going to hit Command A, and let's just drag these notes up. We'll see it jumped up right there, jumped up right there. All right, let's hear how this sounds. I want to hear just these vocals by themselves without the music real quick. That's easy. You can just double click in the background. Nice. Now, that seemed to work out pretty well for what we're listening to right there. We're still going to listen to it in the context of the song and see if we like it, but that seemed to work out pretty well. If it didn't, you can always click on one note and move it to a different spot, or click on this little box right here to select all of those notes and move them to a different note like so. Very, very useful feature. Now, there's one thing you may notice though, right? Here we've got these longer notes and they kind of go from one chord to the other. So maybe what might be useful would be to look at the chord background, and that may help us out a little bit more, right? Let's shift over here to our chord view, and you'll notice that this is now shifted over to chord snap. So now these notes will snap, but they'll snap to notes that are in the chord of the song, or in at least that portion of the song right there. Now we've got some interesting things happening here, right? And with this orange blob over it, it's kind of hard to tell if this note underneath it is in the chord or not. So a useful feature we can do is Command A and then temporarily come over here to note off. This is great because it shows you where the note exists, but it makes it hollow. Now you won't hear anything with that note off. You're turning it off. But this visual reference helps us figure out what notes are in the chords and if we want to move them, right? For example, I see this note right here is in the chord, but then when the chord changes, it's not. And this note is not in the chord. It's still in the key, but not in the chord. Here's a long one right here. So I may want to move these four right here, and these other ones, maybe I want to split up. So let's try something pretty cool right here, right? I'm going to take this note, and I'm going to move this up to there. I'm going to move this note up to there. I'm going to move this note up to there. Actually, I'm going to move this note down there, and I want to do the same thing over here on this one. I want to hear how this sounds when I move that there. And this note goes up, this note goes up, this note up, this note up here. And now what I want to do is come over here to my note separation tool, right? And I'm going to separate that note and separate that note and separate that note and separate that note. And now what I can do is select, and then using the command button, I can select multiples and drag those, switch back over to my pitch tool and drag those up to there. Now I can hit Command A, turn those notes off, I'm back on, and now let's give this a listen. Right away, I see one that I missed right there. Let's move that there. All right, here we go. Interesting. So these ones right here, I kind of didn't like how that was really working with this note underneath it right there. So in that case, maybe I will take this note right here, and 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 I'm going to move those up to there. All right, now let's hear this in context of the song.
When I woke up this morning, I was watching the news, yeah, and I couldn't imagine they done to you, yeah.
This is nice. I like this a lot, especially how we split those notes and moved them up right there. That gave a nice little movement within the chord and within the song that added something different that wasn't there before. I thought that was very cool. Now, we've created this harmony, but we're still faced with one issue, which is that these notes are identical, really, right? We've changed the pitch, but all of these subtle pitch variations, the onset of the note, the envelope, it's all the same. And we want to make this pop a little bit, stand out a little bit from there. So let me show you a few tricks that I do for this. For one, I might go back to my original OO track right here and hit Command A. And I want to come over here to my drift tool, right? Drift is the long, slow change of pitch. Now, we see that our drift is set at 100%. I did not change it yet. So something I might do would be to drag that down. Maybe I'll drag this down to like 30%, right? So it's still drifting, but only a little bit. And then I can switch back to this Ooze 2 track right here, and do the exact same thing, except this time I'm going to drag this down to -30. Now we are drifting, but in the opposite direction, still by only a little bit. You can see it says -30 right there. Now, I also might want to come to my modulation tool right here. Now, modulation is the rapid changing in pitch, and this is the same between these two vocals. So, if you really want to make them stand out, one thing that I sometimes do is I'll select all, and you'll notice it says 100%. I will drag this all the way down to -100%. So it is the exact inverse of where it was before. When one goes up, the other one goes down. Now this creates some interesting places where, because we've flipped it, it does these kind of weird changes right there. And you can watch for those. And this is where the transition tool becomes very useful, right? If you switch back to your pitch tool, you can see where these transitions kind of bubble up right there. And I can take this transition and smooth that one out. And using this transition tool right here, I can smooth that one out. Maybe I'll come over here and smooth this one out as well. Here's another little problematic one right there to smooth out. Here's one right here. And one right there as well. And one right there. Now we're always going to want to listen to these and see. I may have to go back in and on an individual line change that again and re-invert it. We have to see how this sounds, but this technique helps a lot sometimes. And another technique that I really like to do is the formant, right? Now the formant is the unpitched portion of the vocal. And since these vocals are identical, their formants sit in the same area. So if I select this higher harmony, I might take that formant and drag it up a little bit. And what we're doing is taking all of the mouth characteristics, right? The unpitched portion, and we're moving those up in pitch right there. So now they separate themselves a little bit from the original vocal. A very nice trick there as well. And sometimes then what I'll do is come over here to my timing tool, and using Shift Command R, I might click to the right a little bit. That will move all of these over 1 millisecond at a time. Just puts it in kind of a different place. With really tight vocals, that may or may not work. With something like ooze, it's so mellifluous that this tends to work very well. Okay, great. Now that we've made all these changes, let's go ahead and give this a listen.
When I woke up this morning, I was watching the news, yeah, and I couldn't imagine they done to you, yeah.
Nice. And just to give us a different perspective on this, I'm going to go ahead and take this harmony and pan it over to the other side so we can get a different view of it. Let's hear that.
When I woke up this morning, I was watching the news, yeah, and I couldn't imagine they done to you, yeah.
Nice. I feel like that adds a lot. It sounds like two different vocals. We've added some character and some life to it. It sounds nice and thick and full. Now, a couple of last things that I want to talk about today, and even though I covered it before, I want to talk again real quick about this pitch modulation tool. This is actually really designed for vibrato, so I've fairly heavily abused it here by flipping it all the way upside down, and that can sometimes lead to artifacts. A quick reminder, if you come to your pitch tool, you can always slow down those transitions, and that'll help smooth those out a little bit. Also, working in chord mode like this is fairly limiting, as it only shows you the notes that are in those chords, and other harmonies can exist. So if you really want to get experimental and see what's possible, you can always hold down Option and override that snap control, or you can come up here to this treble clef again and go to chromatic snap or even no snap. And just a quick reminder, chromatic snap then, let me turn that on, moves 1/2 step at a time, right? Works chromatically. Hope you've enjoyed this today. Thanks.